a teenager, Pretty Little Liars was one of my absolute favorite shows. I started watching it when I was about 14, and from the first episode, I was immediately hooked. I mean, I'm pretty sure Pretty Little Liars like single-handedly almost caused me to flunk out of multiple classes my freshman year of high school, because I would literally take the bus home from school and then 4 p.m. to like midnight just watch Pretty Little Liars straight. Like no homework, just in front of the computer watching PLL. And yeah, that was my life for a period of time. And I'm a really nostalgic person, so any TV show that was like influential or that I liked at a certain period of my life, I rewatch them all the time. I'm a huge rewatcher, and usually I, stop after the first couple seasons of PLL, but recently I rewatched the whole show, the whole 7 seasons. Yeah, honestly, I don't even know if I watched that final season originally. Maybe I just blocked it out because I don't remember like any of that happening. Except for the, final A reveal, of course. I think that is so infamous that it's like sketched into everyone's minds permanently. So anyway, like I just said, I just finished rewatching all of PLL, and that's kind of gotten me in a big Pretty Little Liars mood. I want to talk about the show with someone, and since this show is not culturally relevant anymore and no one else cares or is watching it, I'm going to talk about it with a camera. So like I said, I was a huge PLL fan, and I wasn't just like a casual viewer of the show. I was in the trenches, okay? I was on Tumblr, I was on the Marlene Twitter account, okay? I was in there trying to figure out who A was, like everybody else. That's the main draw of the show, that's the main mystery. And, like with any good mystery show, well, maybe it's a stretch to call Pretty Little Liars a good mystery show, but with any mystery content out there, obviously there's going to be swarms of people online that are circulating different theories. I mean, if you all watch PLL, which, why are you watching this video if you haven't watched it? But if you guys have watched the show and, kind of were involved, with the fan community or any media about it at all, you probably know some of the most, popular theories about the show. And one of the most common A theories, and the one I personally believed in, my personal favorite, was that Aria was A. So today I want to make essentially a movie-length video where I discuss a fan theory that didn't turn out to be in the actual show, from a teen drama that's over a decade old. So hopefully you all enjoy. And I've recently, since watching the show, gone down a rabbit hole of like Tumblr and YouTube, which is kind of like a time capsule at this point, trying to search up like all the evidence that Aria could have been A. Today I want to make a whole comprehensive video of all the evidence and themes from the show pointing towards Aria being A, and discuss why I think Aria should have been A and why I think that would have been a greater A reveal and a much more satisfying one than the ones that most of the ones that they actually did in the show. So how I'm going to structure this video sort of is, first I'm going to go episode by episode chronologically throughout the show, and point out like what shots or scenes from specific episodes are evidence towards the Aria is a theory. And then I'm going to talk about some general, evidence that sort of spans the length of the show or multiple seasons, general themes and motifs. So that's going to be section 2. Lastly, I'm going to talk about motives, possible motives for Aria being A. So, yeah. Alright, so let's go through the evidence, starting off with Season 1, Episode 1, pilot. So, sorry if I'm like looking down or you can see my computer in the shot. I am looking at my notes at the moment because there's no way I can store all of this in my brain. I am incredible, but I'm not that much of a genius. So first of all, the show literally begins with Aria. It starts with her coming back into Rosewood from a year abroad in Iceland, and that's when both the show starts and the A texts start. It could be argued that the show is kind of just following her because I feel like in the first 2 or so seasons of the show, the writers kind of wanted to make Aria like the main sort of character. So supposedly Aria's coming back into Rosewood from Iceland, where her dad had a sabbatical for a year. But I don't know, this always seems weird to me because I think she mentions Iceland 3 times or something throughout the entire show, which is kind of weird because she spent a year there and I think maybe it'd be more influential to you. It's also weird that she dips out of town right after her friend Allison disappears. Yeah, she barely mentions Iceland. There's no evidence that she was actually there. There's no flashback scenes showing what she did in Iceland, which, I mean, it's kind of not relevant to the show, but it also lends itself that there's no proof to the fact that she was in Iceland, so perhaps she could have been doing something else during that time. She could have been, planning out her whole A extravaganza. I don't know. Or another big theory is that she could have been in Bradley during that year. I'm going to talk about that more later on. Next up in the pilot, there's a lot that happens in this damn pilot episode. So we see a flashback when the girls each get their A texts. We see a flashback of what, the texts are about. And Aria's text is, of course, about her dad's affair with one of his students. And when we go into the flashback scene, we see Aria and Allison and Mona is waving to them, trying to catch up to them. And they essentially just ditch her. They laugh at her, which is something we expect Allison to do, of course. But Aria does not put up a fight at all, and she kind of joins in. She kind of is like, Allison, maybe we should stop. But she doesn't seem to try at all to fight back or actually stand up to Allison's bullying, and even seems to sort of be okay with participating in it, as she kind of laughs along with Allison about Mona, and makes fun of her behind her back, which is not very nice. And that's something we see throughout the series, that Aria might be, sort of crueler and, okay with being mean to other people or hurting other people. Finally, in the first episode, we're introduced to a very critical character in the show named Pictunia, which is Aria's puppet, stuffed animal puppet pig, which apparently she took to Iceland with her. And she liked to bring her on everywhere as a kid, and we even see it in the flashback to the sleepover with Allison in the barn, the night she went missing, which is interesting. And this is interesting that she is so attached to this puppet of a pig because, as we know, A also likes pigs, which we see making Hannah eat the cupcakes with the pig on it, or putting the pig in Mullen's car. And I think there's other instances with pigs as well, or mentioning pigs in some of the A tags. But yeah, that's a connection between them. They both like pigs. All right, moving on from the pilot. In season 1, episode 10, Aria gets her into, she's meeting up with Ezra secretly, because they're secretly dating at this point. She gets into his car wearing a black hoodie, which as we know is A's uniform, and unzips it to reveal herself, which, you know, of course, she's out there like trying to keep their relationship secret, hide from everyone. But that's just, that's really interesting that the writers decide to put that in, essentially have Aria reveal herself from a black hoodie, which is A's uniform. I don't know, could be a clue to something right there, could be signifying something. Moving on, in season 2, episode 2, this is a big one. People love to talk about this one. Mona is walking down the hallway and she calls out to Aria and says, "Hey, Big A, wait up." Now, why did she call her Big A? Come on. Obviously, that's what her name starts with. It starts with A, which is probably another clue. But, like, nobody refers to her as A throughout the series. And, of course, as we know, Big A is referring to, like, Big A was the term used to refer to the A after Mona, which ended up being Cece, but sort of the one who took over the game, or maybe the one who was controlling. This is even more indicting of Aria, since Mona was literally A at the time. So she is A, and she's referring to Aria as Big A, someone who perhaps is of an even higher rank than her on, you know, sort of in the A the A scheme. But I mean, like, come on, why would the writers include this? Why would they write this dialogue in for Mona to say? You can't tell me this was a mistake, okay? In season 2, episode 9, Byron Montgomery, Aria's dad, talks about how mental illness runs in the family, referring to Mike at this point, who's like been breaking into houses and is sort of suffering through some, you know, behavioral and just like mental health problems at this point in the show. Mike's symptoms are reminding him of his brother, who he refers to as like sort of as developing a mental illness.
I don't think we should be giving Mike space. My parents gave Scott space, and you know what happened to him.
Why are you bringing up Scott?
Because when I went up to talk to Mike, he was rolled up in a blanket. It was like I wasn't even there.
Which sounds like some sort of dissociative disorder or disorder involving dissociation, because he talks about being kind of like spaced out, removed from reality a bit, not responding. Many mental illnesses run in families. They're very, you know, genetically heritable. So even though Byron suspects that Mike might be developing the same disorder that his brother had, could be possible that his other child could have this disorder. More evidence that Aria may have some sort of mental disorder is that in season 2, episode 11, Dr. Sullivan is reviewing her patient file. Dr. Sullivan is the therapist that the girls go to in season 2. She's going through her patient files to see if she can try and figure out who A is. And we see that we see 3 files. We see Spencer's, Hannah's, and Aria's, and we see that Spencer's and Hannah's are essentially handwritten. They look like they've been filled out recently, which makes sense because the girls have just recently been going to Dr. Sullivan, so their names, work dates, symptoms are just handwritten on the files. However, Aria's is not handwritten, that's actually typed and printed out. And she has like a client number as well, which is interesting because it seems like she's already being entered into the system. But why would she have a different file type than the other girls unless she was receiving some sort of treatment for mental health before? Maybe she was at Radley and had a patient file there and Dr. Sullivan got a copy of it. So in season 2, episode 22, Aria literally goes to Miss Ashley Marin, girl boss Ashley Marin, we stan, and says that she is A. And she does this at the time to cover for Hannah. Miss Marin finds like a freaking like police report in Hannah's bag that's like labeled with a note from A, right? And then she gets concerned. So Aria goes to Hannah's house and tells Ashley that she's A, but the way she does it is quite interesting. She looks like pretty suspicious throughout the scene, and then she says, yeah, I'm A for anonymous, A for Aria.
I'm A. A for anonymous, A for Aria, A for... I get it.
She literally seems to reveal herself as A multiple times throughout this series. So season 2, episode 25 is also a big one with a lot of clues for Aria being A. This is the season 2 finale. The actual name of this episode is Unmasked, which is, you know, obviously referring to Mona being unmasked as A in this episode, but the only character in the episode who physically is unmasked, they get their mask taken off at the masquerade ball, is Aria. So, and then there's the whole thing with the Black Swan. In this episode, they go to this masquerade ball and A tells them to look for someone, or I don't remember if A tells them or like if they get a separate clue. Anyway, they're looking for someone who's dressed as the Black Swan. This turns out to be Melissa, who's being blackmailed. But it's interesting, if you look at Aria's dress in this episode, it really closely resembles a old movie poster for the movie Black Swan. So could Aria be the Black Swan? Maybe. I think Marlene said on Twitter, which Marlene is the showrunner for PLL, which you guys obviously probably know, that this dress had significance to the plot. So, I don't know. And then Aria also wears, you know, a lot of both black and red striped clothing, which is interesting because those are kind of A's signature colors. And she also wears a lot of ballerina-inspired clothing throughout the show, maybe further giving credence to the idea that she may be the Black Swan. And then the movie Black Swan is also about a ballerina woman who's struggling with mental anguish and has a split personality, which it's interesting that Black Swan could be referring to Aria, because that might be more evidence that Aria has some sort of mental illness or split personality. And then finally, this is the piece of evidence that, you know, like fully convinced me of the Aria is A theory. I think this is a huge one for me because I don't see any other reason why they'd include this in the show. So when we go to A's lair in the Lost Woods, we get like sort of a shot showing different things in the lair, and one of the things we see is a dollhouse with dolls of all the girls, the liars, in it. And what's really interesting about this dollhouse is if you look closely, the doll who's supposed to be Aria is wearing a black hoodie, which is A's uniform. I mean, come on. I mean, Aria does wear a black hoodie sometimes throughout the show, which is probably other evidence that she should have been A. But like, Aria's kind of known for crazy out there fashion. Like, all the other dolls are dressed in like what their characters would stereotypically wear, what they sort of stereotypically represent. Like, Allison's, I think, has like a princess crown, and she's sitting at the top. So why is Aria wearing a black hoodie instead of like her crazy artsy fashion? Unless she's on the A team. That, like, can someone provide any other explanation for this to me? There's no way that they didn't intend that. I'm sorry. Moving on to season 3. Okay, in season 3, episode 2, we get another flashback to Aria and Allison, like 2 years ago, I think, when they just found out about Aria's dad's affair, and we see Aria and Allison trashing Byron's office. And this shows us that, like, Aria can, you know, how, like, sort of easy, it seems pretty easy for Aria to get violent and destructive. And it seemed pretty easy for Allison to convince Aria to destroy the office. Like, she basically just had to plant these random earrings to send her into a rage. Which is interesting because, as we know, A is also, you know, violent person. It is also super interesting that Aria writes, she writes a message on the wall of her dad's office in red lipstick, which is something that we see A do throughout the series, like the iconic mirror message in season 1, episode 4. And then in, you know, season 2, Dr. Sullivan's office is completely ransacked, and there's messages written on the walls as well. We see this is something that Aria, this is kind of Aria's MO over here, writing in lipstick, so. And then other evidence to, like, Aria sort of being a destructive person, like, she destroys Ezra's apartment. She, like, breaks into Ezra's apartment and totally trashes it in season 4 after finding out about the book he's writing, which could be a clue about, like, her anger issues and violent tendencies. But honestly, I think it was pretty justified. You know, Ezra is a creep, and we hate him, and his apartment did deserve to be destroyed. But it's just going to show how destructive she is. Aria tends to make impulse judgments about people and situations throughout the show without getting the full information on them, and, like, sticking to her assumptions despite the consequences. Like, she accuses Andrew of trapping the liars in the dollhouse in season 6, despite having, like, 0 evidence of this. And even after finding out that he probably didn't do it, she, like, sticks to her guns, which is, you know, interesting because obviously that she's, like, willing to make impulse judgments about people and seemingly, like, hold grudges about things, because obviously this is what A does for a living. This is what she clocks in to do. This is how she makes her money. Season 3, episode 7, Aria and Hannah go to visit Mona at Radley, where she leads them into the children's ward, and she gives a little code where she says, Miss Aria, you're a killer, not Ezra's wife. This is one of the most iconic lines from the show. You know, this ends up being part of the code that says Maya knew. But, you know, this is kind of a plot hole because, you know, we expect that Maya knew something about A, and that's what they're trying to find out. But Maya didn't know anything about A. She knew who her killer was, but, like, why would Mona be trying to give the girls information about that? So maybe she's trying to say like that wasn't even a code, and she's giving a clue that Aria was A. Honestly, I don't believe this. I think it's just bad writing. I honestly only wanted to talk about this because I think it's funny that after Mona said this, Aria ended up being both the killer and Ezra's wife. She really heard this and said, why not both? And I just think that's funny. So anyway, moving on to season 3, episode 13, which is the Halloween Train episode, another really iconic one. Aria is talking to Adam Lambert, yes, the singer Adam Lambert, not a character he's playing, just Adam Lambert, on the train, and the train starts going through a tunnel, and he can't hear her, so she writes her name on the fog on the train window. And this is interesting because the last A in her name, the way she writes it, looks a lot like the way that A typically signs off their messages. The A's are very similar. It's also interesting because the first A, she doesn't write like the second A, so it seems like she might be trying to like correct her handwriting or like put on a different persona or something. Like she's trying to like hide her true handwriting, or she puts on a different handwriting when she's A and it's like slipping out. I don't know, could be a clue. So also on the Halloween train, Aria is, her Halloween costume is Daisy from The Great Gatsby. And Daisy in the book is a character who struggles with mental illness and also kills someone, which is interesting that Aria decided to dress up as this character, but you know, she's also an iconic character from, you know, a vintage American novel, so why wouldn't Aria dress up as that? More interestingly, I want to talk about the history of F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote the book, and how it kind of connects to PLL, because I think there's an interesting parallel there. So a little bit of Fitzgerald family history for y'all. F. Scott Fitzgerald was married to a woman named Zelda, who was also someone who struggled with mental illness and schizophrenia, I think. But there's like this really popular theory that Zelda Fitzgerald was actually the one who either inspired or, you know, primarily wrote the story for The Great Gatsby, and then F. Scott Fitzgerald was kind of like just the, you know, the name on the cover. He took credit for it and, you know, marketed it as his theories that he was just a cover for, you know, Zelda doing most of the real work. I think this could be an interesting parallel to Aria and Ezra's relationship in the show. As we know, Ezra is a Fitzgerald, so he's literally descended from F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he can kind of be a parallel to Mr. F. Scott in this situation, because, you know, as we know, Ezra is a writer, and he is literally, we find out he's literally writing a book about the liars' lives and A, and trying to figure out who killed Alice and who is A. And he seems creepy, and the whole red herring in season 4 is that the show's trying to lead us on and make us believe he's A, but it actually just ends up being a cover. But if he's dating Aria, and Aria is like a parallel to Zelda in this case, it could be like she's, you know, the real mastermind behind this, you know, the book. She's A, and Ezra's just like her cover. You know, he's the face that, he's the one that they all believe is doing the work as A, but she's the real, Aria's the real mastermind behind the scenes. I don't know. I don't know if that actually made any sense, but that was just an interesting parallel that I came up with. So, season 4, episode 12, this is when the girlies go to Ravenswood, and they go to the town square and there's like a little magic show happening with the great Charlemagne guy. And Aria is picked out of the crowd to be a volunteer in his little magic show. And this is interesting because, like, Spencer, I think in this episode, she's like, oh, the magician is just a distraction. He's an illusion trying to distract the audience from the real trick. Whereas, like, the assistant, the person behind the scenes, is doing the real, like, all the real work to put on the trick. That's interesting because Aria is the magician's assistant in this situation. So could it be a clue about Aria truly being the mastermind behind A? And season 4, episode 19, Aria is, she's in the car with Ezra, and she mentions that she is writing a story, and she says there's a hero and the villain in the story, and she isn't sure who she wants to win in the end.
But heroes aren't what they used to be anymore, so I got fascinated with the villain.
Does your villain lose in the end?
I'm not sure. Sometimes the villains win.
I think at this point, this is when the show is sort of leading us to believe that Ezra's A. We've seen like his book lair in Ravenswood. So I think this is supposed to be another like clue, like little suspicious writing moment they put in to make Ezra seem eerier, and Ezra being implied as the villain Aria is talking about in this situation. But the show could also be implying that she's talking about herself. She's the villain. She could be writing this story about herself as A. Possibly season 4, episode 21, Aria starts reading Ezra's manuscript for the creepy stalker book he's writing. And she mentions to the other girls that Ezra wrote in his book that he thinks one of them killed Allison, one of the liars killed Allison.
He has a theory, though. And? What is it? He thinks that one of us did it.
He doesn't think they're A, though. He thinks A is Miss De Laurentiis. But Aria never says which of the liars Ezra thinks killed Allison. She said she didn't get that far. She stopped reading. And they assume it's Spencer at this point, but he could have suspected it to be Aria, which is interesting. And maybe that's why she doesn't mention it to the other girls, because she doesn't want to make herself seem suspicious. Obviously, Aria didn't kill Allison, because Allison's not dead. But if Aria is truly the one that Ezra wrote in his book, it could have been because he found out through his creepy research some suspicious things about Aria that maybe actually point towards her being A. And maybe that's why she forgives Ezra so easily in the show. And it's not because of weird fan service for their creepy, inappropriate relationship, but it's actually because Aria knows that Ezra is proof against her and she doesn't want him to go public with it. This is just my wishful thinking. This is what they could have done if they took all these clues and wrote a cohesive narrative for the show. Moving on, season 5. In season 5, episode 4, Aria is like looking at emails on her computer. I think she's watching like Shauna's funeral video or whatever. When she opens her email, we see like, if you look in her inbox, we see like a little preview message for an email someone sent her about building like a fence building project, and it like talking about specific materials needed for this fence. Now, why would Aria be building a fence? Can we think of any reasons why this random high school student who lives in her parents' house would need like specific materials to build a fence? I can't, but I know where a fence was used later in the season, and it was surrounding the bunker that housed the dollhouse. Maybe Aria was building the dollhouse fence. In season 5, episode 7. Okay, this one's another big one. Aria goes into Radley under the guise that she's gonna be like a volunteer art teacher or whatever, but secretly she wants to find information about Bethany Young. Now, Eddie Lamb, who works at Radley, recognizes Aria and asks her if they've met before, and she is like darting her eyes around, super uncomfortable, trying to avoid his gaze.
Hey there. You the new volunteer? Aria? I mangled it, didn't I?
What?
Your name. From the badge?
And she says, no, we've never met before. You must be thinking of someone else.
I feel like we've met before.
I don't think so.
This is interesting. So she could be trying to avoid him because, I mean, she came to visit Mona at Radley in season 3, and she could think that he remembers her from then, but there's like no evidence that he actually saw her then, and also like why would he remember or care about that? Just seems weird. To me, this seems to point to the fact that Aria was potentially a patient at Radley in the past, and that's where Eddie recognizes her from, because he may have treated her or seen her in the facilities in the past. Season 5, episode 11. So throughout the entire show, Aria is really mean to Mona. And I mean, all of the wires are. But I feel like she's meaner to her than the rest of them. You know, like even after Mona sort of recovers from her mental illness and she is working with them to help defeat A, and it's clear that she's not working as A anymore. Aria is still like super mean to her. Like in this episode, season 5, episode 11, they're at the theater and Mona comes in, and you know, sits with Mike and Aria, and Aria whispers something to Mona. We never hear what it is, but Mona leaves and goes to the bathroom, and we find out that whatever Aria said to her made Mona cry. And Mona is like super tough. She can handle like pretty much any insult. So this must have been super, super bad to make her cry. And she even says to Aria, you know right where to put the knife, and you're not afraid to twist it. Allison underestimated you. Suggesting that Aria can be pretty cruel and threatening to others, and a lot like Allison, who, you know, A is, or was at least at some point impersonating and kind of based off. Also at Aria's like rehearsal dinner in season 7, which is literally years after anything happened with Mona for the most part, she like snaps at her for no reason. Like Hannah brings Mona to her rehearsal dinner and she's like, why is she here? Like so mean for literally no reason. So this suggests like how cruel Aria can be when she wants to, which is evidence that she has the capacity to do some things like A does, or maybe she was actually working with Mona or on the A team with Mona, and she is being like excessively mean to try to distance herself and throw suspicion off of her that she may have been connected with Mona in any way, because she doesn't want to find out that she's A. It's possible. And then also in season 5, when it is revealed that Mona knew the secret about Aria killing Shauna, soon after that, Mona is, killed, which of course is something she set up herself, but she is taken into the dollhouse soon after that happens. Which is interesting. Maybe Aria wanted her out of the way because she didn't want Mona to reveal what she did to Shauna. So I don't remember the exact episode where this happens, but in the later episodes of season 7, Aria actually ends up joining the A-Team. The liars go into the shed at Aunt Carol's house where Mary Drake has been keeping files on all of them essentially. And Aria's file is the only one missing, which is interesting. And then A blackmails Aria with the contents of her file, which include a police report that she filled out but never filed, about Ezra pursuing her when she was a student. Which I think is interesting because it's why was her file the only one missing, and why was she the only one out of the 4 who is given a chance to join the A-Team and skip her turn on the board game, the Liar's Lament board game? I don't know, because it's A has things to blackmail all the girls on. It's not just Aria. So why does A specifically want Aria to join the team? Yeah, I think it is pretty suspicious that Aria literally joins the A-Team during the course of the show. I don't think joining the A-Team in and of itself necessarily proves anything. It doesn't necessarily prove that she's A or even a villain, because as we know, Spencer joins the A-Team in season 3 in order to be able to meet up with Toby again. And Toby also joins the A-Team. People on the liar's side join the A-Team, but they're kind of doing it to help, the group in general, to help protect people. But Aria is just doing it because she wants to protect herself and her relationship. It's very self-interested. And it seemed really easy for A to get Aria to turn over to the A-Team and do her bidding. When Spencer joins the A-Team, the worst she does is take Ezra's fake son to a little carnival, and I'm sure he had a great time. And then when Aria joins the A-Team, she's literally going in and breaking into Allison's house and destroying her and Emily's newly built nursery. It's much crueler. And then, of course, she receives the biggest reward. She receives a huge puzzle piece on the game for joining the A-Team, even though she didn't have to essentially get tortured by A at all. She got to sort of opt out of that. And her pretending to be blackmailed by A, potentially, if the writers went with the Aria's A theory, could have been a cover for her and why she wasn't being tortured by A in the board game. Alright, hello, sorry for the spontaneous costume change. It is in fact the next day. Yeah, this video is taking a long time to film. Alright, so I just talked about sort of clues going episode by episode throughout the series for the most part, and now I'm gonna talk about sort of clues from the series that aren't tied to a specific episode, kind of span the series, or kind of fall outside of the show itself. Anyway, yeah, let's get into it. So, in the intro for I think the first 5 or so seasons, it's interesting because Lucy Hale, who is the actor who plays Aria, she's the one who does the little shh at the end of the intro. And I don't know, it's interesting that they picked her to do that. Like, she's the person who ends the intro with like a signal that she's keeping a secret. I don't know, it's interesting that they picked her shot for that, especially because the was like off center. And in fact, Lucy Hale said herself in an interview, I think, like one interview, that she actually thought Aria was A for a time. And she said her reasoning for this was, she said that Aria's like always away from the other girls. She's always away from the other three liars, like off doing her own thing with Ezra or whatever. And then there's often like gaps in scenes where Aria's like unaccounted for multiple hours. You know, show Aria in the middle of the day and then cut away to another scene. And then when we get back to Aria, it's like nighttime and we don't know what she's been doing for those hours. Maybe she's out there being A. Multiple times throughout the show, I couldn't find the specific episodes, but the girls say that out of all of them, Aria is the best liar. Like to Mona in season 2, I think. She's like, oh, which one of you is the best at hiding things from those closest to you? And literally all of them point to Aria. So shows that she's good at hiding secrets from her friends and at lying to people close to her. Something A definitely has to do. Throughout the show, Aria is often seen like writing in a journal or texting, which is pretty normal, but often we like never see what she's writing or texting, which is interesting. Could be little A messages that she's doing that are hidden from the viewer. Aria also has like a lot of phones throughout the show. She switches out her phones quite often, and she's seen like kind of with different phones at this, not at the same time, but like in different episodes, just having different phones. Could be burner phones that she's using to send out A messages. Aria is seen often with dolls. Like there's, when we see Aria's basement, we see that there's like a bunch of dolls and boxes. And then she also, in season 6, we know that she's doing her whole project where she's taking like creepy pictures with dolls or whatever. And as we know, A also loves dolls. Aria is often seen looking in mirrors. This is like reoccurring throughout the show. There's lots and lots of shots of Aria like looking in mirrors, and looking in like mirrors, especially like cracked mirrors, you know, it's like a trope, could possibly represent like a personality disorder, or I don't know, just having some sense of warped identity. Oh, and the little scenes at the end of the episode where we're shown things from A's perspective. We see A doing things like playing piano and taking photographs throughout the show, which we also know are 2 of Aria's favorite hobbies. Also, like things like watching old black and white films, which we know Aria loves to do. Aria also, if you look at A's messages throughout the show, Aria has pretty similar handwriting to A, which is interesting, especially, I mentioned like on the Halloween train, like the A she wrote in her name is like, looks pretty similar to the way that A signs off a lot of their messages. Yeah, also we see throughout the show that some of A's messages are written on a typewriter, which we know Aria has access to from Ezra's apartment. So one of the main questions or doubts about the Aria's A theory throughout the years is like, why would Aria hurt herself or go after herself if she is A? And, you know, honestly, I would like to pose a rebuttal to this question, because first of all, she could be going after herself to throw suspicion off herself, which we see Mona do in the end of season 2, of course. And also, throughout the series, we can see that she is like demonstrably the one who suffers the least from A's threats. In fact, she even sometimes like benefits from the supposed torture that A does to her. So, like in season 1, A tells Aria's mom about Byron's affair, and this is framed as a bad thing because, you know, Aria was like about to tell her mom she like wanted to be the one who did that. But honestly, this is letting Aria get off easy because it lets her mom know about the affair, which Aria wanted to make her aware of, but, you know, without Aria having to like betray her dad's trust or, you know, make her have that awkward conversation with her mom. It's season, is it season 1 or 2? I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. A keeps Noel from telling the principal about Aria and Ezra's relationship. And A like puts like test answers in his locker so then he's suspended or whatever. And this is framed as like A is saying like, oh, I'm the only one who gets to mess with the girls. But then A actually never exposes Aria and Ezra's relationship throughout the show. Aria literally gets to do that on her own time. She gets to reveal it to her parents, her friends, everyone in her life, like on her own time, essentially. Well, Hannah sees them in the car in the first season. That's how the girls find out. But that's not, A didn't expose them. Which is interesting because if any of the other girls were having like a relationship with like that, with someone that their parents didn't like or wouldn't approve of, A would not keep that a secret. They would definitely let people expose them. In fact, like, even when A seems to be trying to expose her and Ezra's relationship, Aria always seems to, like, too conveniently avoid A's traps. Like, season 1, Hannah's forced to, like, give Ella Montgomery a ticket to the gallery where Aria and Ezra are, like, meeting up for their date. Like, Hannah's, like, feeling really guilty about this. Caleb like goes out and, you know, messes up Ella's car or whatever so she can't go. But it seems like very like serendipitous and unlikely that Aria just happened to be able to avoid her mom at the gallery. I don't know. And then in season 2, her and Ezra are secretly dating. Where they're using Holden as a cover. She's like pretending to meet up, go on a date with Holden, but secretly she's going off with Ezra and Holden's doing his own thing, right? So one of these times, A sends a message to Aria's dad and tells them like the restaurant that Aria and Ezra were planning to meet up. But randomly, you know, this is the day that Aria supposedly randomly decides to follow Holden and ditch Ezra on their date, which always just seemed a little bit too weird, too convenient to me because, I mean, obviously Aria found the pills in Holden's bag at this point, so she's a little bit concerned for him. But like before this, Aria has like literally shown like basically no interest in Holden, been going out of her way to like avoid like talking to him really, and this is like her only time where she gets to meet up and spend time with Ezra, so why would she like just ditch their date randomly for this guy that she seemed to previously have no interest in? I don't know, unless she already knew that letter was going to be sent to her dad. Another example of Aria getting, you know, sort of the least threatening treatment from A is in the episode where all the girls get dolls from A, where they like pull the string on the doll and it gives a little message telling them to do things that they want to do, but like they have to sacrifice something in their life to do it, essentially. Like Hannah's is stop the wedding, which she doesn't want her dad to get married, but in order to do that, she has to make a scene at his wedding and destroy their relationship. Spencer's is like, keep Toby safe, which again she wants to do, but to do this she has to break up with him and lose him. And then Emily has to like, she gets like carbon monoxide poisoning in a freaking barn in the middle of nowhere. And then Aria's is just make Jackie go away, which she does want to do. Jackie is Ezra's ex-fiance who's like trying to get back with him and expose their relationship or whatever. But like she doesn't have to give up anything to do this. She just talks to Jackie. Like she wants to, Jackie is like a threat to her. She wants to make her go away. Like there's nothing that she has to give up or like sacrifice. And also she doesn't even achieve it. She talks to Jackie and Jackie's like, no, I'm not gonna listen to you, basically. So it seems like she shouldn't, like she should be, typically A would punish the girls for that if they don't complete the request, but that never happens. She just talks to Jackie and Jackie's like, I'm not gonna go away, and then there's like literally no consequences from that. Season 5, season 6, you know, finale, when the girls are trapped in the dollhouse, this is obviously a super traumatizing situation and all the girls are tortured. But it's interesting that like someone like Spencer wakes up in a pool of fake blood and thinks she killed someone. And the worst that Aria had to do, which is obviously, you know, still not okay, but like comparatively, she just has to like cut her hair and like put the pink dye in essentially. And throughout the series, I think she literally cheats on every guy that she's with. She cheats on every one of her boyfriends, including cheating on Ezra with his own brother. And she's never exposed for it. A never calls her out on that. And this would never happen to any of the other girls. The other girls are framed as, you know, cheating even when they don't cheat. Throughout the show, Aria is a lot less like singularly targeted by A, I've noticed, than like any of the other liars. When A is like threatening her or actively trying to hurt her throughout the show, it always seems to be when she is with other people, like around the other liars, around other people, and they're getting targeted too. She seems to never usually be targeted when she is alone. You know, this could be her covering up for the fact that she's A, trying to seem like she's getting hurt as much as all the others, when in reality she's not. When she is singled out and tortured, you know, throughout the show, it usually ends up not being by A. Like on the Halloween train, obviously she's drugged and kidnapped and put in a box with dead Garrett Reynolds, and that's super traumatizing. But it ends up being Wilden and Melissa who do that. They're the Queen of Hearts or whatever. Which, I mean, like, honestly, I can't keep up with all of this, but I don't think they're working for A at the time. I think they're doing, like, Wilden is blackmailing her, right? Because Cece is A at this point, and, like, why would Cece work with Wilden? I don't remember. Maybe that is A's directive, but it's not from A directly. And then later when she is drugged and hallucinating in her house, that is by Meredith and not A. I think she's chased onto the roof in season 2 in like the Truth Up episode or whatever it's called, the one where they stay over in school. But I think that's by Noel, it's not by A, right? I can't remember all these instances. The only time that I remember A, like, personally attacking Aria when she wasn't around anyone else was, I think, season 5 or something. She has Caleb's laptop to hack into something, and then A attacks her to get the laptop back. Yeah. There might be other times, but I'm forgetting them. I think, like, A tries to hit her with a car at one point, but she doesn't actually end up getting hit. Even though I might be missing instances of Aria getting attacked by A, like, it's really interesting that it happens so severely less than, like, any of the other liars. Emily, like, whatever, she gets drugged multiple times, like breaks her arm or whatever, loses her swim scholarship, literally has a car driven into her house. Emily was going through it. Spencer, you know, she's tricked into thinking Toby is dead, driven to Radley, driven to abuse pills. Hannah's hit by a car, like literally locked in a bunker and tortured with a cowpoke. You know, comparatively to that, Aria's like, her trauma is like not even on the same level. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the evidence that I'm going to talk about from the show towards the Aria's A theory. I probably missed, you know, a lot of stuff, which I'm sure, I mean, if you want to add evidence in the comments below, that'd be appreciated. I mean, I'm not a superhero genius, photographic memory. I can't pick up on everything. So I'm sure I missed quite a lot of potential evidence. I try to like sort of narrow this down and limit like the clues that I put in this video to things that I actually thought were, you know, relevant or could potentially be real clues. Didn't seem just like unintentional or bad writing. I'm not going to talk about really any Marlene tweets. I decided to leave those out because like I really don't want to get into that. I don't want to go back down the Marlene tweet rabbit hole. I'm good actually. So yeah, there's a lot of Marlene tweets from the past that like signal that Aria could have been A. You can look those up yourself. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the possible motives for Aria potentially being A. So the like motive component of this theory is like kind of where a lot of people, including me, sort of get hung up on the Aria is A theory. Like while there's a lot of clues throughout many of the episodes of the show pointing towards, you know, Aria being A or her involvement in the A team, like there's not really a clear motive for her being A throughout the show, right? Because she is shown to be friends with the liars, who of course A is torturing. Like why would she do that? So I just want to talk about like some of the most commonly theorized motives behind the Aria's A theory. So the first one is related to mental illness, and it's that Aria has like a dissociative identity disorder, which is more like commonly known as like multiple personality disorder or split personality. A lot of fans theorize that like A is a different personality of hers. It's one of her alters. So she is not aware of being A in her state as Aria, and, you know, not aware of hurting her friends or hurting herself. But then she has this like violent, vindictive other personality who goes after the people in her life. That would explain why she's like, doesn't seem to know what's going on. She's being targeted by A somewhat. You know, she's friends with the liars and doesn't seem to have a motive because, you know, it's a other personality of hers who's perpetuating these threats and terror, essentially. So I kind of talked about evidence for Aria potentially having a split personality or some sort of mental illness throughout my episode recaps. Like I said, there's evidence that mental illness runs in her family with Byron's brother. And then Aria may have already been a patient at Radley. Eddie Lamb, who works at Radley, recognizes her in season 5, which could be because she was a patient there before. Dr. Sullivan already has a patient file on her. There's a lot of symbolism with mirrors throughout the show, and then Aria experiences a lot of forgetfulness and even things like hallucinations throughout the show, like when she hallucinates that Ezra gets fired and taken to jail, or she like hallucinates A in the bathroom once, which is like evidence that she may have some sort of mental disorder, essentially. So that is kind of the primary theory spread online for Aria being A. Honestly, I don't really like this theory. Pretty Little Liars already has a pretty bad history of stigmatizing mental illnesses and scapegoating mental illnesses. They do it with Mona, who they say is acting as A because, you know, she has some sort of disorder, which isn't even a real disorder. And I can't decide if that's better or worse that they portray her with a fake disorder and then they're like mental institution. Radley is just an awful, you know, place that is not representative of mental health treatment facilities in the modern day at all. You know, they treat things like substance abuse, eating disorders without any care. Like PLL does not handle mental disorders very well. So I really would not want them to make Aria's motive her having a disorder, because I feel like they would not handle that well, especially because DID is already one of the most stigmatized and stereotyped disorders in media. People with DID are stereotyped and portrayed as violent all the time. So, you know, we honestly don't need another show perpetuating that. Would the PLL writers do this though? Yeah, they would. I think if they ended up making Aria A, I think this is sort of the motive they'd go with. They'd make her have some sort of mental disorder, probably. Like I said, I don't really like the mental illness theory behind Aria being A, so I'm going to talk about sort of other potential motives or potential people she could be working with. If Aria doesn't have like a mental disorder, I think she still could be A, but I don't really see her working alone or being the mastermind behind it. Because like, again, she just doesn't really have a motive. Like, she's either being blackmailed or like manipulated by someone else into working with them, or like convinced by someone else that A is the right path, which we do see her doing throughout the show. Like, she does join the A-team in season 7 because she's blackmailed into it. We see Aria is willing to join the A-team to protect certain people in her life in the show. And then also in the first 2 seasons, Mona seemed to let Aria get away with a lot. She potentially could have been working for Aria, or she could have been blackmailing Aria and saying like, we know Mona wanted Spencer to join the A-team at the end of season 2. Maybe she saw Aria's potential like earlier in the show and blackmailed her and was like, I'll go easier on you with my A threats, and I won't expose your relationship with Ezra if you do some things for me as well. I could see that definitely happening. Honestly, after Mona is A, I think Aria could have potentially been working for or with anyone throughout the show, and that's how she would have been A, would have been on the A-team, or would have been working as A. Yeah, one of my favorite theories in terms of potential accomplices for the Aria being A is Aria and Allison being A together. So honestly, throughout the show, we don't really know a lot about Allison and Aria's relationship to each other. It's not super explored. What we do see of them in flashbacks is them being sort of violent and mean towards others. Like, we see them trashing Aria's dad's office, we see them, you know, bullying Mona. So that could contribute to maybe together they're toxic when they get together and would do something like BA. And then we just see some weird connections between Aria and Allison throughout the show. For example, when Allison is like putting on this alternative identity as Vivian Darkbloom, she puts on this dark wig and she sort of looks like Aria. Like Aria even gets mistaken for Vivian Darkbloom. So it's like, was Allison maybe trying to dress up like Aria or trying to imitate Aria? In the show, when they go into like Jason's darkroom in his garage, they see a bunch of creepy pictures of Aria while she's sleeping. And Jason says that Allison took them, which is interesting. It seems like they have some sort of weird, like, toxic, maybe even codependent relationship between Aria and Allison. And as we know, Allison is like the original inspiration for A. Like, the girls suspect it's Allison throughout the series because she would do something like that. So maybe Aria was helping her out because either Allison manipulated her, which we see she's able to do throughout the show, like when she manipulated her to go to the Halloween party, even when she didn't want to in that flashback Halloween episode, or when they get together, they, you know, they're like violent and toxic, like, tendencies sort of build upon each other. There's people that like aren't really a good pair together. They're always bringing out the worst in each other. So that could be the case with Aria and Allison. They're also both connected to Ezra, which is interesting. They both date Ezra in the show, and Allison is like really trying to get Aria with Ezra. I don't know. Maybe she's just a shipper. She's just an Ezra shipper. I could also see like Allison being the mastermind behind A, like doing it to want to like torture her friends. But then she also like used Aria on her team because she saw it was easy to like get Aria to be this violent person. Like she wasn't able to manipulate Spencer. Spencer was the only one who was like able to put up a fight to her. Like Emily was too sweet to ever be A, and like I don't really think she ever considered Hannah or like cared about Hannah, at least in the flashbacks. So I think Allison, if she was the mastermind for A, could have potentially seen like Aria as a potential ally or someone that she could use as a means to an end. To perpetuate these A threats. And then there's also the whole thing where each of the girls get like a sort of one-word description from Allison, which like describes why Allison values them. And it's like, oh, she chose you, Spencer, because you're smart, and then Emily because she's loyal, Hannah because she's admiring, and then Aria because she's compassionate. Aria's description was really interesting because when has Aria ever been compassionate throughout the show? I'm sorry, like, am I misunderstanding what compassion means? Like, compassion means like kind, like forgiving, non-judgmental, right? And she's like none of those things. She's super impulsive and emotional, and like we see her being like mean and rude to her friends a lot. I mean, Aria isn't, you know, she has good qualities, but I would never describe her as compassionate. All the other descriptions make sense to me, but compassionate doesn't. So it seems like compassionate might have been like a lie, and maybe Allison chose Aria for another reason that she's trying to cover up. Anyway, those are all the theories on Aria's motive for potentially being A that I'm going to discuss in this video because they seemed the most logical to me, or most likely that the writers would have done that. There's plenty of others out there. There was another really popular one going around like season 5 or 6 that Aria was in fact Bethany Young, which honestly, given Pretty Little Liars' tendency to kill people and bring them back from the dead all the time, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. But I decided not to talk about that because that's pretty far-fetched, even for this show. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have for the Aria's A theory. Hopefully, I covered pretty much everything that contributes to this theory. I wanted to make this video as comprehensive as possible, but also not like go on too many tangents, even though I feel like I did. But yeah, I love this show. I wish Aria was A. I think a lot of people did. It would have been a much better ending. Let me know if you like this video, if you like this sort of long form, deep dive media content. And I might do more videos on Pretty Little Liars in the future, even though like it's really not relevant anymore. So let me know if you would like to see that. But yeah, I enjoyed doing this. I always enjoy talking about PLL, even though it's a mess of a show. If you want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel, like the video, leave a comment, let me know all the things that I missed. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.